The South has a way with words. Most people I've met there all have a unique, albeit tragic, story. Yet they string their words together in such a deliberate, careful, colorful way. In a recent text exchange, I was simply stunned by the simplicity and the beauty the words my new friend spoke to me. You are a street paver. A street paver, eh? It was perfect. How often we overlook the street pavers. The people out there working in the elements, doing the dirty work, paving the streets so everyone can get around. Street pavers. They are the swept aside heroes. To be called a street paver was an honor I've learned through my grief and my experiences. In an effort to help you, I am trying to pave the way for discussions I wish I had with others in my harshest moments. This street paver, however, may be out of her league because this mama is on a mission paving roads and building bridges. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us. I am Paulina Butska and you are listening and watching, and that's okay. Today we are joined with a very special guest, Reecie Gilmore. Full disclosure, everybody grab your tissues because I don't think Reecie and I have gotten through a conversation without crying. Reecie, you have one of the most, I want to say, poetic ways of describing what you've been through. And you always seem to find these words that just, I think, hit home. You have this incredible story of love and loss. And so today we are calling your episode, I Have All This Love to Give and Nowhere for It to Go, and That's Okay. And those were your words that you had said to me when we had spoken on the phone, when you were talking about your story and you were talking about love and loss and grief. And so we were introduced through Katie Porsche, who is also on this podcast, guys. And she talks about this. How does she put it? She has a suitcase of things that she carries around with her. And I love the way she explains that because Reecie, it is so true for you and for me and for anybody listening. We all have something that we have been through.
It has been a mission of love to offer hope to the next family in need.
Let's talk about where your love was, is, and where it's headed right now.
My story, it's a love story. It's a love story of my son, who unfortunately is no longer here to tell it. So I became his greatest storyteller. It started on June 30th, 2006, when I became this mama to this perfect little boy. I had two older daughters before him, and my girls at the time were 7 and 8. So he was a wonderful surprise. And here came this little boy that just rocked my world and was a mama's boy and everything that I could have always hoped for in a son. And then unfortunately, tragedy struck our family on June 7th, 2008. So right shy of 2 years is what I actually got to have with him here on earth. I lost Clint to a accidental drowning. He wandered out of our house and drowned in our front pond. At that moment, that my whole life changed and was turned upside down. I had no idea how I was going to get up in the morning and brush my teeth anymore, or comb my hair, or much less learn how to be a mom to 2 living children when I felt like I was given 3 to love and take care of. So here I was catapulted into life after loss, and I just didn't know how to navigate. So I knew at that point that I had to become his greatest storyteller, and I had to create a legacy for him because I had all this love to give and no place for it to go.
We say, you had all this love to give and nowhere for it to go. You say this beautiful thing that you were a mama, and you still are a mama of three, right? Like you still are a mama of three, and that did not stop. It just
100%.
life just took a different course
Right.
for you. So let's
Right.
talk about the course that it did take.
The very first year, Paulina, I spent, I like to say, under the covers. Um, for the very first year, I would say for sure the very first year, I spent just trying to figure out how to live again. Um, it was a rough existence. I was literally just existing and just surviving. The best way I can describe it is I felt like I had been handed a death sentence. And every day I was serving on death row, waiting to die, because the thought of living here on earth without him was too hard to wrap my head around. Therefore, I lived every day not with the thought of, I want to end it, right? I knew that I had two other little lives that depended on me. But I lived every day thinking I'll be okay if I wake up tomorrow and I'm with him, or I'm not here, or I'm not breathing anymore. So I felt like for a long time I lived on death row, and I was serving a death sentence. And I hated the saying that time heals. I hated that was ever a saying. People would say, give it time, give it time. Time will heal, time will soften. And it was the most painstaking reality to think, oh no, I'm going to tell you what time's going to do for me. Time is just going to change my routine. Because overnight, I went from being this mom to three young children with a 2-year-old that I was a crazy maniac in the morning trying to shuffle one to daycare and shuffle two to school. And then overnight, I remembered the harshest reality was when I went back to work. And I remembered grabbing my purse and looking at the clock and wanting to rush out the door because I had to be at the daycare by 5:30, or we would be penalized. So I would have to pay more. And so there was that alarm clock in me that I knew at 5:05 that I better be rushing out the door. And all of a sudden reality hit after I lost him, and I put my purse down and I realized that I didn't have to rush. There was no baby anymore to go pick up at the daycare. So my routine changed. Time took care of the routine. The routine changed. As I began to try to figure out, how am I going to keep his legacy alive? The only thing that I knew to do was to help. And that was help other bereaved families who also had lost children. Clint was a donor. He had given the gift of sight to 2 people. I guess it was right at the year mark. I got busy. I got productive. I had told my whole family, I need you to give me a break for this year. For this year, I need you to let me do it my way. I need you to let me have my pity party. Don't judge me. Don't scold me. Don't try to fix me. Just let me do it my way. Because I promise after year 1, I promise them that I will emerge a new me and I will do the best that I can with his legacy. And so, literally at the 11th month mark, because I'm a big goal person and I adhere to goals. I wrote my letter. I wrote my letter to the 2 families that I knew that he had given sight to. And I reached out to LOPA, which here in Louisiana is Louisiana Organ Procurement Agency, and that was the agency that that assisted and allowed Clint to be a hero. Also, the Southern Eye Bank. I called LOPA and I said, I remember leaving a voicemail, and I poured my heart out on that voicemail. And I told them who I was, and I was Clint's mom, and that I wanted to get involved, and I needed a platform to stand on, to share my son with others, and I wanted to educate a community on the importance of making decisions when our children can't, because this is where I always say that we become the voices of these special children that no longer have a voice. Clint wasn't old enough to decide, did he want to be a donor or not? I was the one that made, us as parents, we
Mhm.
made that decision. So it became just a mission of love to want to spread that message and to let parents know that this is an okay conversation to even have with your living children. I get it. It's not a very fun topic to have, but you know what? When you're pregnant and you're going to have babies, what's the first thing that we do? We research the best car seat known to man, not because we anticipate that we're going to get in a car crash and we're going to need to have that car seat save our child's life, but because it just makes us responsible, great parents. I mean, we have hard conversations as parents
Mm.
anyway. So my thing was, I think parents should talk about this, because the first time that I'd ever heard about being a donor was when I was 16 and at the DMV getting my driver's license. But Clint was 2. So he
Yeah.
had never heard, it was just a conversation we had never had. So at this point, I just felt like more parents need to be talking about this, because I wasn't the first and I won't be the last. LOPA and the Southern Eye Bank opened their arms wide, and they gave me a platform to stand on, and it allowed me to meet other families that had also lost children. And so we built a community of love, a community of hope, and that made all the difference in the world. And I knew then that my passion was the bereaved families. It was dealing with other families that had experienced loss and helping them find purpose inside the pain, a way to navigate life after loss. Because, Paulina, and I know you know this, grief is love turned upside down. To know grief is to know and understand love. To grieve something so big, you had to have loved it with your whole heart. So if you love big, you grieve big. And that doesn't change. So that's what I wanted to convey to other families, that joy and grief can coexist, that we can find a way to live out a legacy without having the physical presence of these precious people that we so desperately want in our lives.
Clearly, I'm not a parent. Um, I've experienced grief and loss in a very different way. And I don't know that I've ever been as graceful as you dealing with my grief, because I think my grief has caused me to kind of do really weird things, do very self-destructive things. I was in that moment of just let me be. I don't want to live. I don't want to do this. And so, again, I think that you've had so much grace through all of
Mm.
this, but I know that in my time as a journalist and in my time in speaking to grieving families and in my own research, I know that one of the things in families who lose a child specifically, um, the statistics for parents to stay together and the statistics for families to move on are so they're so intimidating, I want to say,
Mm.
almost, because they don't shine a hopeful light. You were such a go-getter and you wanted to get to that year mark. You did grieve, obviously, and I think
Mhm.
it's still so many years later, it's still so raw, because
Mhm. Mhm.
it's still your baby, right? Like it's
Mhm.
still a loss.
Mhm.
And like I said, even though you are a mama of 3, you are a mama of physically of 2 and 1, in a different
Mhm.
way. And so you had to
Mhm.
find to be okay with being a mama in that way. But how do you find, I guess, a path to keep walking with your spouse at this point too, when you both are grieving, right? And then how do you be a mama for your kids
Mhm.
after knowing that you don't want to be there at the same time? You do, but you don't.
That's exactly right. And Paulina, I was a statistic. I had a failed marriage. Um, and there were many complicated factors. I think that there were complicated factors before we were actually married even. Um, But I got busy, and I think there was some resentment in that. Um, so yes, I mean, I very much became one of the statistics where we did not survive. We did not survive. And you know, Paulina, the bereaved, I want to be very honest. Bereaved parents, they're a unique group of people. In many, many ways, we are the most fierce, amazing, courageous warriors in this life. Highly misunderstood, highly intolerant to crap, and sometimes super hard to love. So to the outside world, we become very misunderstood because our pain is so deep, and we become so drawn into our own heartache that we look at everybody else that hasn't experienced what we often consider, a bereaved parent will often consider this level of pain to be the worst, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas you and I talked about this, it's relative to what we've been through. So if the hardest thing that you've ever grieved is the loss of a dream or the loss of a job, to a bereaved mom, it seems so secondary. But in all actuality, over time, which is our dirty word of the day, I feel like time is our dirty word, but time becomes something that we have to be keenly aware of because it plays a huge factor in the grief process. That I feel like over time, a bereaved parent will tell you, but a loss is a loss, is a loss, is a loss. And once you have felt it, you feel it to your core. So it's, I guess I'm probably struggling to answer your question. I know that the statistics are horrendous, you know, to keep families together and to keep marriages together. And it's hard. It's hard to be, it's hard to be a bereaved parent. We are judged. We are judged from the moment of the loss. You know, we become the dinner room subject or the dining room table talk at night when the husband walks in, sits down with his wife and all his kids. And he says, hey, did you hear about the story of so-and-so? Did you hear they lost their child? You become the sad story. You become the reason that people hug their kids tighter at night. You know, I used to hear all sorts of things. And at the end of the day, you know what? We are real people that have just gone through the hardest thing that we feel like life can throw at us. And we become like we're living in a fishbowl. So bereaved parents, all of a sudden, everybody's eyes are on us. Everybody's watching our every move. Is she okay? How's she doing? Is she doing it right? No, she's not doing it right. Did you see she was smiling the other day? Did you see? I saw her out at a 4th of July outing, and I think I saw her dance. I mean, my whole thing used to be, what are we supposed to look like? What do you think that we are supposed to look like? And the whole stigma of people, you know, people running around saying, oh, you are so strong. You are so strong. I can't imagine, or I couldn't do what you have done. You know, you feel like saying, boo, you don't know how strong you are until you have to be. And nobody chooses to be this strong. But we become judged and we become watched. And I will tell you something, Paulina. The one thing that I knew right away, I knew that if anybody was going to talk about Clint or talk about us or talk about his story, whatever was going to roll off their tongue, it was not going to be, well, if you had have known Reecie before she lost Clint, you would have loved her. She was fun, and she was a people person, and she loved life. And then all of a sudden Clint died and she spiraled out of control. I thought to myself, I will not be that story. I will not let the loss of Clint be the demise of me. And if they're going to talk about Clint and they're going to talk about his death, you know what they're going to say? They're going to say, but oh my gosh, have you seen what she's done with his legacy? Have you seen the walk that she's walking? I knew that I wanted to make a difference, and I wanted to be that type of role model. And if people were going to watch, I was going to give them something good to talk about. I had to. He deserved that. He deserved that because he was everything that was good within me. He was the best part of me, that I knew that that had to stay. Here we are 13 years later, and I was blessed probably 5 years ago. I had a job that just kind of landed in my lap, and it allowed me the opportunity to be the program director of a local nonprofit here in Lafayette, Louisiana, that assists families who have lost babies, called Maddie's Footprints. And we assist families that have suffered from a miscarriage to a stillbirth up to the age of 1. And how fortunate I have been for all these 5 years to walk side by side with these brokenhearted mamas and daddies. And I say all the time, every day that I work, I do Clint's work. And basically, my job is just to love the brokenhearted, which ultimately landed me where I'm at now. And that is, I want to extend this love out. So we have I've opened another nonprofit, and it's called the Rescue Group. And we basically pick up where Maddie's leaves off. So we assist families who have lost a child from age 1 up to 17, or currently enrolled in high school. So even, up to 18. And that's where I feel like, Clint's legacy is the strongest. It's allowing families to know that there's hope. There is hope after loss. And we all need a platform, because we all need a place for our love to go.
Let's go back to some of the things that you said about how people would respond after, right? Like that brings up so many things for myself. And I'm sure anybody who has been through such a public loss understands exactly what you just said. They understand being in the spotlight, whether it's a parent who's lost a child, or where I grew up in Brooklyn, we were in a very heavily Polish community, right? And we had a business. My mom had a business. My father was a business owner, and they were very well known. And just like you, when we had gone through our loss, we had local newspapers calling. We had, people stop by, and some people would stop by to, wish their condolences, but others would come by just to gawk. And then the rumors.
Paulina, you know what we call that? We call that, there's some people that just want the dirty, gory details. And they're not worthy of our story.
No,
they're not worthy.
But I think that, anybody who's kind of been in those shoes, like myself or you, who's experienced kind of, you're grieving and you're going through the worst part of your life, because it is, like whatever that worst part of your life is, and you have other people trying to input their own, I guess, beliefs and whatnots onto you. I don't know about you, but I know for myself, I mean, that enraged me to some moment, where I left for that reason, right? I said, the moment I can leave, adios, goodbye, New York. I'm freaking over you. I'm over these people. I'm over wanting to be around anybody who knew me or knew my story. And I did not stay and do what you did, right? Like I I was not, like I said, I think graceful keeps coming up for me because I think you've done such a great way of just really navigating through this in a small city. I've lived in Lafayette, Louisiana. Lafayette, Louisiana is small. And I lived there for 3 years. And I feel like, once you know a couple of the roads, you know it all. And then you kind
Oh,
of
right.
really, the few major people and you know them all. But,
Mhm.
people with great hearts, great intentions, but those intentions don't always come off the same way. There are some people
Mhm.
who should never open their mouth, ever.
Ever, ever. Yeah.
I remember the
Mhm.
rumors. I remember, going to the bank and depositing checks and somebody being like, "So you're the girl whose dad's committed suicide?" And I remember my brother being on the subway, and these three little old ladies are all fighting over. They all know how my father committed suicide. Well, no, neither of you know, but thank you for your input. Like, so I understand that like raw emotion and trying to navigate through this, and then having almost the no tact from people almost,
Mhm.
because I don't think there's
Mhm.
another word to describe it. And if that's too harsh, you know what? Well, the reality is it is harsh what people
It
do
is.
in this, in
Mhm.
this, in these moments. So how did you navigate through that? And kind of what is your advice to parents who are navigating through this right now?
If we could have a key word for for this episode, it's time. The one thing that I can tell you that time did take care of is I probably became more tactful, witty, prepared in my replies and my responses to some pretty insensitive remarks. So you and I both know, because we've been there, that you said it earlier, people can have great intentions, and sometimes those intentions fall short. And often, I really feel like people don't know what to say. So they opt to say something, and it either comes off as they don't know what they're talking about, or it's insensitive. They
Mhm.
have no idea what they've just said. But they search, I feel like honestly, people search to feel like they can relate. For example, never will forget. Sweet, sweet, sweet lady. She tells me one day, she says, "Well, baby," she says, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to hear about Clint." She said, God just needed another little angel. And I said, I'm not going to call her out, so let's just change their name. I said, "Well, Miss Betty, you have three little angels. Why didn't he take one of yours?" Was it the nicest thing for me to say? Probably not, but I felt it at that moment. And I did not feel bad for telling her exactly how I felt. Um, then I would have people that would compare. They had just lost their dog, or they had just lost, buried their mother to cancer. And look, that pains me. It breaks my heart. But I don't believe any loss should be compared.
Mhm.
It's like, hold your tongue. What I needed to hear from people, what I needed to hear from people, I needed them to say, "I don't know your pain, but I'm here. I am present, and I'm not going to run away from you. And I'm not going to get mad if you don't call me back. And I'm not going to be mad if you don't text me. And I'm going to give you grace, and I'm going to give you permission to feel whatever you need to feel." And I had one friend that told me, "I'll be your punching bag. If you're mad, be mad at me." You've seen Still Magnolias?
Mhm.
Everybody needs a Weezer. Do you remember that part in the movie? Sally
Yes.
feels so upset, and that is the most realistic part of the movie when Sally Field is crying and she's like, "Why me, why my Shelby, why?" And they put Weezer, they're like, she goes, "I just want to hit something, I just want to hit something." And they grab Weezer and they push her in the camera and they say, "Here, hit her." I'm like, that is perfect. Everybody needs a Weezer. Find your Weezer. Yeah. Yeah. But some people are worth our story and some people aren't. Something that I've learned along the way, Paulina, is people ask the common question. So how many kids do you have? You go get your nails done or whatever. And while you're sitting there, so do you have children? Yes. How many kids do you have? And it's that moment of hesitation where I'm like, do I go ahead and tell you that I have 2 here on earth and 1 here in heaven, and I potentially rock your world and like mess you up for the day? Or do I just say, I have 2? Or do I just say, I have 3? My point is, it changes. It changes from day to day. And you know what? I get to decide. I get to decide every single day who is worthy of knowing whatever part about me. I'm the storyteller.
Yeah.
I'm his storyteller. And there are some times where that person, for whatever reason, at that very moment, I know they are so worthy of that. And come to find out, for whatever reason, whether it's a God thing or if it's Clint just coming and just being present with me, because that happens often, I find that I'll, out of the blue, share my story. And sure enough, it's because it was a mama who also lost a child that needed to hear it too. So that's what I've done. I pick and choose, and I make no apologies for it. There are some days that I leave the post office and, my little postman who, is so kind and sweet, he thinks that I'm a mama to all girls. And I don't get in the car anymore and cry because I feel like I've let my Clint down. Every day I know I do Clint's work. Clint is fully aware of how much I love him. And there is not a second of any moment of any day that I am not doing something that I feel like he would be proud of. Clint has made me a better person all the way around. Loss can make you bitter or it can make you better. And I choose for it to make me better.
We talk about time here a lot. And, so again, I remember going back and saying, time will heal. When I hear that, right? When I would hear time will heal all things, it didn't. It hasn't. It's just made it easier over time to not think about it all the time. It's not so in your face all the time. You learn, I think you said it so well, you learn to have a different routine in time. And I couldn't have said that better myself, because one, you don't believe it when it's being said to you in the beginning. I don't know about you, deal with loss and grieving families regularly. Even though I've been through a personal loss, I don't necessarily know what to say always, because I feel like I haven't been through the loss that these people are going through, and whether it's a friend or whatnot, or whether it's whatever their loss is. So I tend to just be, I'm here for you. Kind of what you said, right? Like, because I don't know what to say, because I remember going back to those days where people would say things and I'm just like, just shut up. Just get away. Like, just don't say a word. And like you, I would pick and choose who I wanted to talk to, and I would pick and choose who I felt comfortable talking to, and who I felt was my Weezer, right? Who I could just break down in front of, and who I could have those moments with. So again, this podcast and me doing this is, yes, I've done this now for a number of years, where I've become, I guess, the voice for families who've lost people, and I've told stories, and I've loved doing that. But this is different all around. Like, this is a moment where we can sit down and we can share both our griefs, and we can kind of talk about the shared experiences and how you managed to, overcome some of those struggles that you went through, and the struggles that I've been through, and hopefully in the process help somebody else, right? Every time I feel like I share my story with somebody, there's always a reason for it, right? And so I think the work that you do, I said to you, I said, where were you 10 years ago? Let's talk about that. The work that you do is so invaluable. And I think that it's healing to you. I know that I can only imagine that in some days it is extremely triggering to you. and then some.
Yeah. Um, I don't know, Paulina, I know that you follow the rescue page. I know that you watch some of our videos and you watch our Monday memorials and our testimonial Tuesdays. Today, actually, I featured a very dear friend of mine who was the very first family. It's ironic that it's today, also the day that I'm doing this with you. I featured the very first family that I ever reached out to. It was almost 1 year to the date of me losing Clint. So I lost Clint 13 years ago. So it was 12 years ago, June. And I'll never forget feeling, remember, I'm a goal setter, right? I needed to get through my first year, and boy, I had plans. I was getting busy and productive. So I was at that mark. And you know what, Paulina, it felt good because I was finding reasons to smile again. I was getting busy. I was doing things. I was contacting LOPA, getting involved. And I'll never forget, I was actually at my mother's house. And of course, this is 13 years ago. So, we still receive the newspaper. Now we really don't get the newspaper anymore, but then we did. And I was laying on my mom's couch and I just randomly, now this is Clint's anniversary was June 7th of his death. This was June 3rd. So 4 days before. And I'm at my mother's house and I pick up a certain section of the newspaper, having no idea that I just picked up the obit section. And I see the most beautiful little boy that could have been Clint's brother. And I start reading about this little boy, and I notice that his funeral is that day. His funeral is June 3rd. He was 3. I start Googling and doing more, I'm like investigating, like, oh my gosh, here I'm thinking, I'm so glad that I'm a year down the road. And yet here this family is about to be where I was 1 year ago. It was the most horrific feeling ever. So come to find out, the more I investigated, and as I'm looking online, he had drowned also. It was almost an identical story. He had wandered out of his house, drowned in their backyard swimming pool. Before I knew it, Paulina, I was writing a letter. I was sitting there. I noticed it was 12 o'clock noon. His funeral was going to be at like 2 o'clock. And I started writing a letter to the mama. I've got in my car. I got in my car and I drove to the church, having no idea what I was doing. All I knew is I was on the move and I was taking this letter to somebody that was going to be able to give it to this mama, which was pretty brazen. Because let's face it. I don't know what I was thinking, but it works. So it doesn't matter. But at that point, I'd written to this mama. I walk into this church. I asked to speak to Reverend Nat Simmons. I'll never forget his name. And I said, I don't know why I'm here, but I know I'm here for a reason. And he pulled me into his office and I said, I know that you are about to do the service of a baby Carson. And he said, yes, ma'am, I am. And I told him my story. Come to find out, he had a 2-year-old son also, this preacher, and he had never done a child's service ever. And he was struggling. And he said, I think not only did God send you here for me, but I think also for this family. So we prayed together. I left my letter. I asked him to please give it to this mama who I believed was going to need me, and I needed her. It was the first mama that I had found that had a drowning too. I was wanting to connect. Do you know, Paulina, 1 month later, almost to the date, because it was almost 4th of July, so exactly 1 month later, I get a phone call. Reecie, yes, this is Amy Arnold. I will never forget where I was, what I was doing, what I was wearing. I sat in the middle of the floor, put my workbooks down. I was working. And I could not believe that 1 month after her baby died, she called me. We connected and we've been like glue for 12 years. I had no idea that one mama, my Amy, would turn into now 12 years later, over 1,300 families later. So to answer your question, yes, is it hard? It's absolutely hard. But you know what? All I know to do is run to the fire. Then I deal with the emotions that come after. And I've become better at processing. I have a Katie Porsche on my side. Um, and all those mental health experts keep me in check and they keep me straight. And I have an amazing husband that lets me run as far as I can until I get too far and he pulls me back in lovingly. And he says, when enough's enough. And he loves me through the moment and then he lets me run again. I couldn't do this without him because this is hard work. And remember what I said, bereaved mamas are hard to love. And he loves me through all of my craziness and he lets me be passionate and it drives him crazy, but it's also the main reason that he chooses me over and over again.
You know, as you were talking about writing this letter, I know that I have these moments where I am on a mission, right? Like, and people will look at me. I think my family has gotten used to me going just like, hey guys, I'm going to drop a bomb on you and you have to be okay with it. Like that's how I roll, right? Like I'm moving to California. You have to be okay with it. I am quitting my job and I'm going to start a podcast and we are going to cry all the time in these podcasts and talk about grief and trauma. And my family is just like, we can't keep up, but okay. Like,
yeah.
So as you're speaking, you know, talking about like you're sitting there crazed and writing this letter, I have this like image of you just kind of like, it's almost like you're spiraling moment,
Yeah.
but you are finding something in the wreckage of everything that you've just experienced and gone through. And so there is something so beautiful, poetic, and just raw, I guess, almost even is the word, and just saying, you know what, I'm going to share my vulnerable side with somebody that I had no clue. You know, me and you, Reecie, we've never met in person, and I've never cried as much as I cried on the phone with you the first day we cried, and I couldn't even get a word out. Like it literally just stopped me in my tracks. And so I'm not used to that, right? Like I'm not used to having a response like that. I'm not used to feeling like I don't have control, but you know what? That's the beauty in connecting and being real and raw about some of these topics, because they are hard. And they, you know what? I'm sure that there are moments when you go and you talk to some of these mamas. And like I said, those triggers are real and they come up. I understand wanting to run, help, and just kind of be like, you know what? I'll deal with the mess of this later. It's okay. I'll deal with the fallout of not having a paycheck coming in later, right? Like I will keep doing this. I will deal with the fallout of that. I will deal with the fallout of what it means to move cross country by myself at 23. I will deal with all of that later. Let me be in the moment. And so I think there's something so beautiful and so poetic again about that, of how just you use this raw, real trauma to connect. You know, we talked about your husband and how he's been so instrumental in loving you through this, because I think it's anybody who's been through trauma. If you have not done any type of healing, I think we are all hard to love. Like let's be very real. If you have been through a trauma, you are hard to love. You are hard to love. I am hard to love. I put up those walls, I put up those boundaries or no boundaries some days, and I'm just like, I run as far as I can until, you know, I probably jump off a cliff most days, and then I'm like, okay, I'm back. I'm good.
Right.
You know, but let's talk about your two little girls who 13 years later, I'm sure are not little anymore.
Grown.
Grown. You're coming at it from a mama perspective of like, you know, you lost a child, but you had these two little girls too. who then watch their mama fall apart, but then watch their mama grow and blossom and find a way to use that trauma into something beautiful.
Mhm.
Talk to me about kind of how that relationship has been and how that's grown.
When Clint passed away, they were 9 and 10. And the older one, the older daughter, was actually the one that was watching him and took him in the house. We were in the backyard picking cucumbers. And so it was Macy, the 10-year-old, that took him inside. Nothing out of the ordinary. We had all been outside. He was hot and playing on the trampoline. And, you know, when he died, I did something that one of the things that I am the least proud of in the middle of my grief and my moment when the EMTs were there working on Clint. I turned to my older daughter, my 10-year-old, and I ran up to her and I grabbed her by her shoulders and I said, "You were supposed to be watching him." And I'll never forget that look on her face. She's 20, gonna be 24 now. And I have spent a lifetime apologizing for that moment. And, the irony behind all of that is she took her pain and turned it into purpose. And she is a lover and a helper of people now too. I'm very proud of my girls. They watched this. They watched this unravel. They watched me spiral, and they've watched me climb back up. And in turn, they are very much the same. They are resilient warriors, and they are determined and persistent, and they take all of this experience and they use it for the good. Kids watch you, but kids are also forgiving and they are resilient. It's okay for our children to see us broken. I remember explaining it to my girls because I went MIA on them emotionally, here but not here. And I remember having a discussion. I was trying to learn how to live again, and meanwhile, they were just kids. They both have said, we forgave you a long time ago. We gave you that grace. We knew that was something you couldn't control, and you taught us how to love through the process. Ultimately, this grief taught us how to love.
You very briefly touched on the fact that therapy has been a big part of this journey for you. Let's talk about that, because I think for anybody who's kind of in that first initial stages of grief right now, or that first year, the first couple of years after, grief is a sneaky little troll, is what I'm going to call it today.
Yeah.
Because every time, I know for myself, and I'm sure that this is something that you've experienced as well, every time I think I'm past something else pops up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought I was past it. And so Facebook has those wonderful Facebook memories that pop up. And one of the memories that popped up was a year after my dad had passed. And it was like, I'm done. I'm closing the book. I'm better now and I'm good. Well, it's 10 years later, and that journey didn't end there. Right? Like it didn't. It was a very long journey, and I still clearly am not okay. Right? Like I clearly have these moments where the grief is raw, and some days I'm okay, and other days I'm just like, this sucks. And other days, it's not that you forget about it, you just keep moving. You just keep moving, because life comes, right? Like other things happen, and today happened. You can't keep going back to that day. Right. You can't keep getting stuck in that day. So, but for me, I know therapy was a major help in at least moving through some of this. So talk about the role that therapy played for you, your family moving forward.
Getting help was key. In the beginning, I struggled because it was hard to find a therapist that I felt like could relate to my loss. And, often therapy, they want to diagnose you one way or the other. And they want, that we become a target of being tried to be fixed. So it was a struggle to find a therapist that basically looked back at me and said, I can't fix this. There's no fixing this. But I'm here to listen to you, reason it out within yourself. I'm going to pull the things out from you that you need to hear yourself say, because it sounds like, I have had many of them say, it sounds like you know what you need to be doing, but you get caught up in the process of doing it. And for me personally, being a helper of people, I often become too hung up on helping others that I forget about my own needs in the process. So that is where therapy has been wonderful, because I have somebody in front of me that basically reminds me, you matter, you count, you cannot pour from an empty cup. If you are trying to give to somebody else, if your cup is dry and empty, you are no good for the next person. Therapists are there to fill our cup. And that's what mine has been good at doing for me, not necessarily diagnosing or offering me a better solution than what I know. Yeah. It's basically just filling my cup up so I can pour onto somebody else.
I love that. I love the way you said that. I love, you're right. We can't pour from an empty cup. And I think that I've learned that the hard way. I'm very much like you. I'm a giver. I'm very much like, what can I do? I step into action. I spring into action. I've always been that way in my reporting career. I've been that way in my personal life, in my everything, right? Like, and I think that shows in even the relationships that I've chosen, thinking that I can help and save, and you can't, right? There are certain things you can't help with. There are certain things you can't do. And you certainly cannot help if you yourself are just depleted, right? If you're at nothing. So how long has your journey been with therapy?
Off and on since the beginning. Off and on. I would say more so in the last, believe it or not, more so in the last 5 years. Number one, because I have a marriage that I love and adore, that I want to be the best version of myself for this family. Therefore, I know what I need to do. The younger version of me didn't do as much of that. I know now, being in the role that I'm in, I require that. I need that therapy in order just to keep me in check. Do I go all the time? No, but I would definitely say I know when I'm missing it. And I am no stranger to just call and say, I'm coming over. Can you see me now? And have to.
I'm sure your therapist loves you.
I love her. We're just, yeah.
She's like, Reecie, okay, thanks again. You're blowing up my entire schedule. Gotcha,
well, I would be lying. We help each other. We're helpers of people. I joke and I say I don't have the degree on my wall, but being a helper of people, you do a lot of the same work. And therapists have a heart. That's hard. It's hard because they try to be cheerleader of people. And sometimes that's an exhaust. Pom-poms are heavy.
I don't know. I was never a cheerleader.
Try to be the one to always say, you can do it. Come on, you can do it. And somebody's just constantly like, no, I can't. No, I can't. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. That's an exhausting job. So, I try to be a good patient, and I try to make my, therapist proud, and be a walking billboard. I try to be like, look how it's worked for me,
And I think
don't be afraid to go.
Right. And again, the more we talk about this and the more I think this becomes part of the mainstream conversation that we have with people of like, hey, I'm going to therapy. Hey, I'm doing this. Hey, I'm still okay. I'm still the friend that you've known for all
Yeah.
these years.
Yeah.
But I think you said something earlier that I wanted to touch back on, because you said that version of you no longer existed, the one before Clint, before the death of Clint. And you're right, like there is a new version of you that's emerged. There's a new version of me. There's a new version of, I'm sure, your kids,
Mhm.
your ex-husband, my
Mhm.
brother, my mother, everybody that's been touched by grief. There is a new version that comes of you, right? And
Mhm.
it takes a long time for that version to kind of come to and be the person that you're meant to be, and move
Mhm.
forward in the direction that you're
Mhm.
supposed to. Who is that person versus who that person was, and kind of how did you become okay with who you are?
In many ways, I feel like I buried her, and I am okay with that. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
The person that I am today is, I was always passionate. One of my good friends, she told me, she said, Reecie, she said, Clint did not have to die in order for you to become some sort of um, possible grief expert or whatever. And I told her, I said, no, you're right. You're right. Clint did not have to die for this to happen. What it did do is that it enhanced all my talents. So when Clint died, I was probably always a passionate person, but I became even more passionate. I was always a decent writer and able to express my emotions. Well, when Clint died, I became even better at that.
Mm.
When I was handed a platform, I was good at standing on a platform my whole life, right? But I became unstoppable. And I always say that's because, you know, I have a little boy that I have to push forward for. Um, so the person that I was before, she's nowhere near who I am today. Would I want Clint back? Absolutely. Would I give up everything that I know and would I give up every family that I've helped to have him back? Yes. Let's be real. But that's no longer an option. So I live with what I've been given now, and it doesn't matter who I was before. I like who I am now. And who I am now is because I loved Clint, not because I lost him.
You say that so beautifully, because I have an episode that's coming up on the anniversary
Mm.
of my dad's suicide. And one of the things that I say on there is, I know the why. Like, I know why he died, and I know how that has helped me get to where I am today. Would I love to have him here? Yes. Um, did I find my own why as to why he had to go so I can be where I am today? And I think that you have found your why. And I think that, it's been a painful journey, right? Like, because to find that why and to accept it, that this is what you need to do with that grief, with that loss.
Mhm.
I think it goes back to what what we're calling her Miss Betty, and what Miss Betty said, as insensitive as that was, you've helped so many families in the process,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? I
Mhm.
think that it always just comes full circle somehow, right? You just have to find that why. And that
Mhm.
time
Mhm.
really does, it takes forever. It almost takes forever, right? Like, it feels like it takes forever.
It does. I'll tell you just real quick. So my dad, being this amazing, Christian man, um, and I questioned my faith, and I questioned God and I was mad. I was angry at God. And, he told me one day, he said, Reecie, he said, I want you to imagine that every day God keeps a journal. And he said, I want you to imagine every day he writes on your pages. And he said, some days it's loving, encouraging words from a loving father. And some days it's words of disappointment from a hurt father. And some days it's gentle reminders of what you need to do. And he said, and then some days I want you to imagine that God marks through the whole page and he writes, we'll explain at a later date. P.S. I love you, God. He said, on June 7th, 2008, I imagine that's what God wrote on your page. He said, now it's your job every day to walk through this life and wait and keep your eyes open for every later date explanation that you will be given here on earth. Because he said, even though some things on this side of life you will never understand, and we're not meant to understand on this side of life, there will be plenty of later date explanations if you are willing to look for them. You are one of those later date explanations for me today. He was right. He's super smart.
I'm glad I could be that for you because I think that you've been that for me in the very short time that we've known each other. My gosh, you've literally just found a word to say every single time I've come to you with anything. And then you found words that I didn't even know I needed to hear, and I think that again, whatever you want to call it, we
That's
always
right.
find the right people when they need to come on our path. I
Oh,
think you are one of those people. I think we have found each other for that exact reason, Reecie. Before we close out, I really just want to go back to really quickly. Let's talk about rescue.
rescue.
I think of rescue you, but
I,
I think
you're not the only one. Yeah.
no,
It's an
no,
acronym. It's an
right,
acronym.
right.
So it's rescue group, but it stands for reaching, encouraging, supporting, and caring for you. If it's appropriate to say that we're excited to extend this love to a entire community of hurting families, I am excited to do that. The rescue group is local to Acadiana. We cover 10 parishes here in the Acadiana area, Lafayette, Louisiana. We offer financial aid for families that lose children from 1 to 17 or are currently enrolled in high school. We're very excited about these different prevention initiatives, whether it be drowning awareness or suicide awareness and gun safety and car crashes. We're really excited to bring that awareness to our community.
Reecie, what an incredible conversation with you. What an incredible mission, incredible journey that you have tasked yourself with, and in telling Clint's story and in keeping his memory alive. You're preserving his memory and his legacy.
Thank you.
And how beautiful to turn that grief into something so beautiful. Still I run.